We welcome you to our workshop meeting tonight, June 25th, 2013. We'd like to excuse Councilman Hudson, who's out of town, and Councilman Stady, I'm sure, will show here shortly. We'll move on with the approval of the agenda.
I'll move that we approve the agenda as outlined.
Second.
Do you want to approve the agenda, Councilman Truman?
Yes, I will approve.
Thank you very much. You're okay. You're all right.
I'm getting some legal advice over here from city council.
But you see what he bills by the hour? You want to be careful with that one.
He billed by the hour?
No, this one, he was getting the advice from.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
A vote on the motion.
We did a motion to approve the agenda? Yeah.
Aye.
He had a second. Oh, that's right, needed.
Yeah, we haven't had the vote. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 2, discussion and review of consideration to sell a non-significant parcel of ground owned by Washington City in the North Bridge subdivision. Roger Carter.
Really, Mayor, this is just a cover. I'd sent out all the documents we had received up to this point, so this is more of an issue of answering potentially any questions, or if I can't answer them, being prepared to answer them at some time. We do have one kind of item that has come up. We believe that there's just a small parcel that was not included in the appraisal cost, and so we've actually scheduled a meeting with Mr. Belliston, who's representing the property owners, tomorrow. So we're going to be meeting with him and clarifying that. That's the only issues that we had, but the property size at the going rate was significant enough that the city would have wanted to make sure that that was included.
So I guess if I read it correctly, their appraised value was 15% of what the value of similar pieces in the front of the property.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
A buck a square foot or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't know how deep I get involved in those appraisals, because they do have, their own kind of methodology there. And that was one of the reasons. If you do have some concern with that, we have other options too. We can certainly get other appraisals and that. These were ones that, as we require of the property owner to provide for us. So.
Is there a staff write-up on this?
There's not a staff write-up. We can get this. But what will happen then from a process standpoint is we've got the subdivision plat amendment that has gone through Planning Commission already, because you recognize again that the additional land needs to be added to that particular subdivision. So there's been a subdivision plat amendment that has gone through the Planning Commission. They've approved it for recommendation to the council. So that's the first item on your agenda tomorrow. The next item on the agenda, and I don't think they're right next to each other, but the next item on your agenda is for the council to say, yes, we would be willing to put land up for sale. It doesn't mean you're authorizing the sale to that group or not. What that does is then gives us the opportunity, because we got to post it, and you have to have a public hearing on it, or a public meeting. Sorry, it's not a significant parcel, so you don't need a public hearing, but you do need to have it in a public meeting. So we would then schedule that for a subsequent council meeting for us after we'd noticed it and all of that the council is considering selling these particular pieces of ground, and then we'd come in and take final action on the sale after that point. If for whatever reason the sale is not approved by the council, then we would simply not record the subdivision plat amendment because we couldn't. And but then if it is approved, it's all ready to go, and then the transaction can just occur. They can go ahead and file. So that's kind of the process we put together. And so again, tonight's discussion was more along the lines, if you had any significant concerns, again, we are meeting with Mr. Belliston tomorrow. We could also address any concerns you had, or if you'd like to give us some other direction too.
Yeah, if you had questions on that value, I don't know how he comes up with the value, we'd be happy to ask because.
Yeah. I guess it seems somewhat strange. It's just like pick an arbitrary figure of 15% of what the front property would go, and I don't have any experience to know whether that is accurate or not accurate.
We can ask him where he can,
we can, and we'll plan on doing that and seeing if we can get them to get back with us at least by tomorrow night. Again, the good news is tomorrow night you're just saying, yeah, we're willing to put it out there and show the public that we're willing to sell this parcel, but it doesn't become an official transaction until after the council takes the action.
And I assume we have our own engineers verify the legal description of what's actually getting deeded to them.
Yeah, let's see. Well, it's gone to Legal and Community Development to review, and so they've gone through the process, or they're going through the process, or gone through the process to verify that.
So do we typically have, and maybe the question also is, do we typically have somebody that on contract that reviews our subdivision plats, just to double check on the others,
Yeah, it's your firm. It's Mike.
no, I mean for like the
Engineering.
legal description, like an engineer's
Oh,
review of it.
No, we don't. We
Okay.
typically will just have that done through the legal review, when we've ever had.
So the
We
most
used to
that
have,
do on
we used to
legal-
have Councilman Bundy that could look at them sometimes and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. But usually it's just a
We
legal
just
review.
read through the legal description from that standpoint.
So we just rely on
Oh,
what the buyer
That's
gives
true.
and
That is true. Who do we have?
Yeah,
We have Rosenberg. That's
I
right.
thought
We do
so.
have Rosenberg.
somebody will
thought
look at,
that-
okay.
Now, I will have to check to make sure that's happened on this one.
And
But this has gone to community development to do their process, so I'm assuming that community development is doing their process and we have sent over to legal.
yeah.
And I would-
Typically it goes to the engineers, goes to Rosenberg, they check out to make sure there's no questions on legals, closings and stuff like that, then they send it to our office just for the legal review part of it, so that is part of it.
And since this is such kind of a strange request, and we're actually doing something to benefit the homeowners, which we don't mind doing, I'm assuming that we're not coming out of pocket any of these costs associated with
No,
that.
and this is not a unique request. We've had these before. And so we're following the same pattern we've done in times past. Sometimes they're to correct encroachments. We've had landowners that have actually encroached upon Washington City property, and then they have to remedy that encroachment. Sometimes they've actually had to remove some structure, and in other cases, the council's been willing to sell the parcel of land that was encroached upon. So the policy, the practice in the city has always been, all costs are handled by the property owners. So they took care of the title searches, they took care of the appraisals, and all the other stuff that we would require of them.
And I guess I was just a little surprised that there was, one of those parcels was 10,000 plus square feet.
Is that the one that kind of bubbled up?
Must be. a big
Yeah.
one, yeah.
And like I said, I know community development, because community development was one that called today and said, it looks like they're missing a piece. And so we looked at it, and it does appear that they're missing a piece as far as this is what we owe the city. And so we're going to meet with Mr. Belliston tomorrow and get some clarification on that. But it was about $1,000.
Okay.
So, okay, so those are the things. We'll address your questions tomorrow then on that. And again, that's the process we'll use tomorrow with respect to, so when you look at the subdivision plat amendment, you can look at it just as a subdivision plat amendment under those terms only.
Any other questions on that? Comments? All right, we'll move on to item 3, discussion review of a cooperative agreement between the Utah Department of Transportation and Washington City regarding the Southern Parkway.
Mayor, Council. UDOT is now working on the design on segment 3B, which is the connection for the, for 3A ends at Warner Valley and 4A picks up at Washington Dam Road. We're working on the design in between the two. And with that design, we found some issues with some stormwater. Our stormwater out of Warner Valley, the drainage out of there produces 66 CFS of discharge, which is quite a lot of water. And we've worked with UDOT, and they've agreed if we fund part of the improvements to actually pipe that water from the Warner Valley over to the Gypsum Basin. The Gypsum Basin has plenty of capacity to hold that water. It's a very good situation for the city. It saves us a lot of cost. If we didn't do this, we would actually have to put in another detention basin downstream, as well as a 36-inch pipe to pipe that water down to the river.
It's like 3 miles.
It's about 3 miles, and just a real quick estimate that we did on it is about $2.5 million just to pipe that. So this is a really good situation for us. We haven't let them know how much it benefits us, but it's a good situation for us. They asked us originally for $300,000. We've got the old existing right-of-way that they'll be building the Southern Parkway over, so they're giving us $80,000 credit towards that existing right-of-way. And then they put in some verbiage about us participating in the grade separated interchange. And that is actually down on segment 3A. And it would be exit 8. And the property owner down there, they've worked out a settlement with that property owner to where they'd install a box culvert underneath the the Southern Parkway, and it's, I believe, 24 feet wide, 14 feet tall. The cost of that box culvert is basically the same as putting in the overpass, which in the future, when an interchange comes in, the box culvert just probably won't work. So it makes a lot more sense to put the overpass in. The problem with that is they have to raise the grade of the Southern Parkway to get the height so you can actually make it a usable overpass. They're not asking us to participate in that, but they wanted the verbiage in here showing that we are participating in that. So I guess part of the money they can say is going to the cost of that.
That's that construction of the bridge?
Correct.
Okay.
It just makes a lot of sense not to put in a box culvert that in the future has to be torn back out. And especially if the cost of the improvements is the same money, the only additional cost is raising the grade of the Southern Parkway. It just makes sense to go that direction.
So this to me sounds kind of like when we were working on Telegraph and we wanted to do a little more than what they would pay for. That's essentially what we're doing here. We're getting them to step up a little better than they would do, and we're contributing some money to make that happen.
Yes. Now, time is of the essence on this. They've actually hauled it, really a lot of the work on the Southern Parkway until a determination gets made of if it's gonna be the interchange or box culvert, which is the lane, the asphalt lane on it. So that's kind of why I've kind of hurried up and brought it to council to work meeting, and it's on your agenda tomorrow for approval. And Jeff hasn't even really had a chance to look at it as well. I think
Well, yeah, and I've seen the agreement. There's not much in it really. In fact, that's one of the questions I had is, do we have, like the engineering and the attachments that are gonna be able to go with this? Cause that's really gonna spell out much of what's gonna happen here, I'm guessing.
Did they have what?
The attachments or the exhibits, I mean, we refer to, you know, do we have the I mean, I'm guessing they have the engineering on this maybe done already.
Well, yes, they're working on it. I mean, like I say, this is so fast, trying to move so fast that we hurried up and, UDOT hurried up and put the agreement together, got the agreement to us, so I could get it on the agenda, so we're not dragging out with an agreement or approval from the council on this. I'm sure probably come Thursday, have a meeting with UDOT on Thursday, I probably will get all the exhibits and any other attachments that come with it.
Hey, real quick, Mike, would you mind explaining again how this stormwater drain, where does it pick up and where does it go and where does it tie into?
The drainage comes down from the Warner Valley, the road that goes up to the Warner Valley. There's the Warner detention basin that sits up in there, and it actually discharges over ground. It doesn't pipe down. And it will come down to where basically the Southern Parkway is there, and then it would actually load into a pipe there, and then it's piped on out clear to the Fort Pierce, actually. It's only designed to carry a certain percentage of that water. In the past agreement, we participated in, and we built the detention basins right there at the new interchange. So we're capturing that water, and that's all the water runoff that's coming off the side slopes as well as the flow out of the Warner Basin. It'll all come down there, it'll hit those basins, but those basins still won't hold all the water. I mean, it's not a retention, it's just a detention. So it will actually discharge 66 CFS for an 18-hour period.
And so they're willing to do the underground piping?
So what they'll do is from these basins, the detention basins that were constructed at exit 10, it will now pipe that over to the gypsum basin, which is the big long dike further to the north. And that, we've met with NRCS on that. It has more than enough capacity to take that water in there. And they've agreed to allow that water to go in there. And then that water actually can go, if it does fill up, it'll actually go into the same drainage and pipe to the Fort Pierce wash.
Would any future development tie into that storm drain system as well, or no?
No.
But this would be something that otherwise we'd be responsible for?
Well, this is really helping a lot of those developments, because these developments that are building out there have to take into account this pass-through water that's coming off of the ground that's upstream from them. They actually have to take into account that pass-through water is gonna come through. So it's really gonna help these developers, especially Stookie Farms,
Yeah.
for what they're going to have to build in their development to maintain the water, but we still have to build an outlet to get
So
that
this will
water to
keep
the
a lot of that
river.
water off those developments in the first place?
It will. It will really help the developments.
And how are we gonna fund our portion? Do you have dollars in your budget, or?
Yes, I have money in my stormwater budget in reserves that we can use to cover this. This was not put into the budget because
Right.
when we prepared the budget, this wasn't even on the
But
radar.
you've got reserve for that?
But we have some reserve funds that would cover this, and we just probably have to do a budget opening to add that in.
Well, good job, Mike. That's good. It's exciting.
What's the 80,000 property donation and other consideration?
That's the existing roadway out there.
Okay, that's just for right-of-way stuff.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we've taken into consideration or had some discussion with the Conservancy District with that new reservoir they're talking about in that drainage. What effect would that reservoir have on this particular project and the stormwater's futures coming out of there?
The reservoir that's gonna be in Warner Valley, Warner Valley actually has a break point, and that reservoir, about 3/4 of the way down Warner Valley, it flows back to the north, which would flow into that reservoir.
Correct.
So that reservoir itself, none of that water would head to this drainage area.
So this is kind of the south flow.
This
that
is
you're-
the
you're
south.
Collecting.
Correct. Yeah, the south flow out of that area. And then as you go further down in the Warner Valley, then that actually has a drainage that goes to the Fort
And
Pierce.
is that kind of where the fault line is down through there as well, through that south?
Yes.
It'll be once every 50 years that they actually use that pipe, but we'll be glad we had it when we do.
Yeah, that's right. When it does happen.
I've been here a little over 15 years and I've never seen water in those debris basins. But we actually got photos, and they're very interesting photos of when they constructed those debris basins. Lester actually got them from the NRCS. When they were constructing that gypsum dike, they had a flood come down through there, and they got the photos of that flood coming through that. So there's,
My grandfather used to tell a story of the Virgin River. They knew it would flood every year, so they were prepared for that one, but it was whenever the floods came out of Warner Valley that always took them by surprise.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and the pictures that we got, it's actually the gypsum, so the Long Valley drainage that came down into the gypsum wash, and it just, yeah, everything they'd done in that, building that dike through there, it just washed away in that flood. So it definitely does serve a purpose, and, you know, this is just a little piece of what we're having to deal with these debris basins. We're changing them from a low hazard that was protecting farmland to now to a high hazard where we're actually protecting life and property. So it's a lot of work that's going along with these.
All right, thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Okay, item 4, discussion regarding property landscaping between Quail Ridge Drive and Green Spring Golf Course. Councilman Stady, we'll let you lead on that.
All right. I had a discussion with my friend Shane Wood here about some property, and he can explain it better than I can, so I'll just introduce you to him and let him explain what we were discussing, and I thought it would be a better discussion to have among the council rather than just in private, so.
Appreciate your time. I've even got an impressive slideshow today, so.
We fit right in around here
Entertainment
today.
for you. What we've got, I've got clients that are coming in interested in buying this house at 780 Links, North Links. And behind the property back here, you see the satellite image, you've got kind of a gray area that's not being maintained by the golf course, and it belongs to the city. It doesn't belong to the homeowners, and so they don't have, as a matter of fact, I guess one lady tried to do a little bit of tumbleweed removal back there, and she had the police called on her by the superintendent of the golf course. So I figured I better,
which hole is that?
not go out there and
Which
pull
hole
any
are we
tumbleweeds.
Hey, Mayor, hold on. Let's see if the mayor, I told him, I think the mayor could probably guess that.
Is that 5?
I see a bunch of my golf balls over there.
Is that by the ravine?
We're looking at the outhouse would be right up here on this top corner up here. And then this is
Oh, okay,
North
so that's
Links.
7. All right. I've
So
hooked
is
the
it
ball
7?
there several times. I know
So-
where you're talking about.
Is it you that's nailing the houses here at 780?
No, it's the guys I golf with. I'm usually right down the middle,
Yeah,
about 480.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't wanna talk about that.
At any rate, this is, this area here, and as a matter of fact, I've got some better pictures. This is the back there.
Yeah.
Put that right side up for you. So you can see, it's just kind of a dirty little area. It's got a lot of weeds in it, in that neutral zone between the golf course where the out of bounds is and their property line. Now, what the next door neighbors have done there is just come in there and put some nice chad down and a couple of desert scape plants and thrown a little bit of water to it so that it's just kind of, you know, a lot more beautiful to look at. Well manuscaped there, you know, for both for the golfers, you know, point of view here and for the homeowner's point of view out. So it's going to increase the values of the property in there. And they'd just like the permission to be able to go in there and do something similar to that.
What do we need to do to give them permission?
Well, you know, I think Barry ought to address some of that, Barry. Well, I think, Denise sitting right next to you, got back. Yeah, I think if you're gonna do something like that, you'd have to do it as a whole project and not piece it. I mean,
Cause this isn't the only spot on the course, so we kinda have this,
no, this is
This
just
effect,
a
right?
native property. The problem you have is people go and disturb that and then you get problems.
yeah, I guess what I was trying to say, is this isn't the only hole where we've kinda got a meander ground that's not really
Yeah, and
golf.
you got quite a bit of, what happens is over time, property owners have gone in and the native stuff, the creosote and all that, they've gone in there and cut them down when they shouldn't. And that's the problem you get. So instead of having those native, they're there and they've gone in there and ruined it. That's the problem you have. You used to have creosote bushes along there that were really nice and looked good and were part of that native. They blocked the view of the mountain, and so they've gone in there and removed them illegally. That's what's happened, and that's why you have what you have there. So I think if something's gonna be done, it should probably be put back as close the way it looked before, to a native that looks nice, and that it wasn't disturbed before. That's why you have the weeds and stuff come in, because it's been disturbed. So I think if you're gonna do something, it ought to be done right. The whole thing ought to be done, and,
Is this close to native, the picture we're looking at here? Is that kind of what the native look
That
is?
looks like it's getting sprinkled to me.
I have to go look exactly where it's at. But,
Yeah, I know that's a
but
close
there
shot
used
there,
to,
but
that's why I said there used to be creosote and native stuff in there, and they've been hacked out of there. And Barry, it was my understanding when the course was put in, I mean, its intention was to have that native
Buffer.
buffer Exactly. along the side, and this has actually been a challenge for us for a lot of years. Let me tell you why the police, I heard about this. The reason the police were called is because they were going in there and taking out the creosote bushes. They came on a Saturday, they were in there, a crew was in there chopping the creosote bushes down, and that's when the police were called. It was golf course property that hired landscaping people to go in there and chop out stuff, which wasn't on their property. That's why the police were called. We can't appreciate that. I mean, this is the homeowners don't think it looks good, and so they want to make it look good, and it does become a challenge for us. It certainly does that way. I mean, I can see their point of view. They think that we want to do it this way, but once the soil is disturbed particularly, that's when the sage starts to come in, and then the tumbleweeds. Well, and like I say, I think something could be done there, but I think it needs to be done right. There needs to be
what would you recommend, Barry? What would you think would be the right way to?
I
because
think
you're
we need
kind
to
of
look
in
at,
between now, where it didn't look as good as it used to.
we have some pictures of where those bushes used to be, and,
Yeah.
over the years, we've seen where they've been taken out. They do it at night, or they do it on the weekends, and this was actually a Saturday, when the crews aren't usually there, and they knew that, and they'd hire these people to come in and do it on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And,
Because this
somebody
looks
was-
nice too, what this homeowner's
Yeah,
done.
what would be the downfall if you allowed a homeowner to do, I mean, obviously, there's a separation from golf course property to there, to the fence.
Yeah. I don't think
If they
there,
want that look and it isn't encroaching upon the golf course, and they're willing to pay for the water and what,
I don't
why
think
would
it
there
would
a
be.
problem?
I think Jeff, the superintendent, ought to be involved in it, because there's some golf issues. That's not out of bounds. There's still play that's taking place there. There's some out of bounds markers that are in that area.
Technically, you can see, actually, this is the outbound marker
Yeah.
right here. So the out of bounds runs actually right
there's still quite a bit of
This is
space.
all indigenous to the area. It runs
Yeah.
through that wash that comes down through there. And then just between this gray area, between the boundary markers and where the nets are at and the property is where they come in and actually done something.
Like,
And maybe they have done something to this one that, they've lacked the maintenance on it and now it's kind of just gone to.
Well, and some of it's construction, during construction time.
Yeah, we've had
That's
people
what,
that have done yard,
sometimes it happens. They'll pull over there,
they've come back in on the golf course side when they're constructing, they've gone in and ripped up the property, and that's on the golf course when they should stay on their side. So that's kind of some of the stuff we've had. But I don't think we're opposed to that as long as it's done right and as long as Jeff looks at it and we resolve any,
well, I think one
questions the
other
golf
thing you're
course
gonna have to keep in mind too. This requires a whole lot more maintenance down the road than you're gonna have with native.
well, that's something we'll have to look at. Who's gonna
Well,
maintain
that's-
that then?
See, that's what I look at and say.
Is that the
it
homeowners?
Well,
Well,
but
it'll
that's
have
the
to be.
issue. I don't think it can be. I think if it's gonna be our course with our ownership, we can't expect necessarily them to maintain it, and certainly not in perpetuity. They may feel great about it when they plan it, but
yeah, I see a couple of issues in there, and the one is obviously you want to have a consistent theme throughout the golf course, so is every homeowner going to join in with that consistent theme? Number two, what happens when they do put it in, and even if they are supposed to maintain it, you get golfers out there stomping on their bushes looking for balls, and they're going to call the city complaining they put
When
the
it's
bush in, you
on
just
the- even
destroyed
on the
their
city's
bush.
property, yeah.
So the city would have to maintain it. Does the city want to maintain it to avoid the issues of destroying their bushes?
well, and I'd also say from a watering standpoint, if the city's in a maintenance issue, you're gonna not want the watering coming from the home direction, that direction, because the minute they don't wanna pay for that anymore,
It
you've
does.
now got an issue. So if we're gonna do that, we ought to bring the water from the golf course side to the plants.
Barry, it just seems, I don't know if anybody here is even on the council back, you may have been on planning commission, you may, no. We've gone through this before, I mean, it could have been 8, 9, 10 years ago, but, and I thought that what the council at the time was, they wanted, maybe it was Jeff at the time, that the superintendent out there to come up with like a policy or a guideline under which.
They do for
They would-
construction now. That was a
Yeah.
construction
Was that just
issue.
for construction?
Yeah, we
That
had to have the
wasn't for this?
fencing. Yeah, we had to have the construction fencing put on the property line
Well,
because
this
they
wasn't
weren't doing
for-
that.
This wasn't for the general
Because
authority?
there's a
that-
good chance that that same thing happened here, it looks almost like, when they're doing the construction, they bring the bobcats or whatever around.
No.
We've also had a couple of people that had pools put in their backyard, and they actually came back around and just wiped out the golf course property that was all native and beautiful. Well, the next year, it's all weeds and because that native property was destroyed, and that's the same thing that's happened along there. That's what's taken place.
I'd like to see us just try and reestablish it in its native state.
I agree.
But that takes a lot of time, and it's not a weekend satisfaction thing. It takes a long time for the native stuff to really get reestablished, but
I don't know what it takes to put a creosote bush back in, but those are,
you could plant them and get them in,
Yeah.
but it's not fast.
I know you can get them.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not quick.
No. But that's what was all along there, and that's what's happened. They didn't want the view blocked, and so they've cut them out.
So it's a view thing.
Yeah, the view of the mountain.
That's right,
It weighs real heavy on your appraisal, I found out recently.
Does it?
Yeah.
The bonus of being on a golf course doesn't outweigh the fact that it has
No, I know,
the weed in it.
I'm not arguing that point, I'm just saying that that's why the homeowners are, feeling angst, $50,000 differential in appraisal, they're getting ready to sell. They'll be out there with their saw trying to cut stuff
So
down.
if you can say I've got an unfettered view of the mountain,
That's what they've done,
That'd be a hard policy.
which
Try
isn't
to
a good
draft
thing
it
for the
the
golf
council,
course. It
but
hasn't been.
We'll allow them to do it, increase the property value for
Yeah,
that
no, you
homeowner.
couldn't do that. No, like you say, you see the one that looks so nice, and you certainly can see the benefits to it, but there again, it does have some long-term ramifications.
see, and that's why right there. is
We
not-
struggle with the, maintenance on that golf course costs as it is, and so you start looking at adding those to it.
That spot right there would be quite simple to beautify.
Well, and it
That would
doesn't
be
all
a
look,
real easy
that doesn't
spot
all
to-
look like that.
Well,
That's the worst, that's the worst part.
It really is, 'cause you've got, this is the next.
A lot of it
door
looks really
neighbor
good.
Directly on their left-hand side, and then the one on the right-hand side of them has come in, they haven't done near as much as this, but they've cleaned it up. And,
They have.
just thrown down some chat, so you've got a little bit of, decent looking, I don't know, dirt, I mean, if you can call it decent looking dirt, It's a little more beautiful.
Pull up that picture of the bird's eye view again. And Barry, is this are there more areas than just these, 3 or 4
There's
homes
4 or 5.
affected?
Oh, it's
or are there
around the
other
whole,
areas?
it's around the whole, I think one of the solutions you could have is something you just discussed earlier. I mean, if those people really wanted that piece of property, why don't they have it appraised, as long as it's on the other side of the out of bounds, where they purchase that property, they landscape it, they take care of it, and we don't have anything to do with it anymore.
And no complaints about golf balls going in there.
I think if it's on the other side of the out of bounds, we
Yeah, they
wouldn't have
just
a
lay
problem with
claim
that.
to them anyway. A lot of those.
And then we
lot
don't
of
have the
them,
maintenance problem, we don't have the cost, and they have to pay for it. And do exactly what's been done on this, what you just discussed earlier.
And you're getting assessed for that extra property, so you're right.
That makes sense to me. I'm just,
I think for what it's worth, it would be worth it for them to go ahead and pick it up. I don't think they'd argue with that if they were able to, do something similar. And they don't want to do anything extraordinary. They just want it to look nice out there. They don't want anything,
They still want to
encroaching
keep their
views.
views, so they probably want to be planting trees.
Yeah, no, they'd like to
Big
keep their views for sure.
So where do we go from here?
Sorry to make this so complicated.
No.
I didn't realize I
not
was opening such a can of worms on you.
That's what these meetings are for. We like to open them out, let them crawl around.
That's the
Let's see if we
workshop,
put 'em
huh?
back in the can.
And this hasn't been the first time.
Yeah.
This is,
Okay. I don't feel so bad then.
Well, when,
Do we want to have our superintendent maybe look at it and see if he has some ideas on what to do, or do you want to talk to the homeowners? I mean, what
I'd like to
what are we
identify
able to?
every spot on the course that we think kind of fits into the same general problem, I guess, if you will, if you call it a problem. And then get a better grasp on how much is really there. I mean, are we talking acres that will eventually end up meeting the?
there's a buffer all the way around it. There's all over the place, but that's the particular place.
That's kind of the one
Yeah,
spot
Where you
that's,
was at,
yeah.
A lot of the,
cut that stuff out, and that's what's caused the whole problem. The other places is not.
a lot of the places are still pristine,
And
yeah.
Right,
everything
yeah.
cut it out, and there's not a problem. It's because of what's been done there.
So-
That's the whole thing.
so on the one hand, from the city's perspective, we're looking at the homeowners and saying, well, you kind of caused this mess,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But now we're in a situation where these may or may not be the same homeowners that
No.
are in these homes, and they're saying, would like our golf course property, at least the city's property that butts up to the golf course, to be a little nicer. And they're saying, we'd like to come in and improve it, and we're upset because we're saying, you guys already destroyed it, so now we gotta find some plan. We've talked about potentially looking at selling it back to them.
But
We could have our
think-
superintendent look at it and design, and maybe say, here's what we could do, here's what we can't do, but maybe we ought to look to your department for some
Well,
guidance.
just to answer Councilman Segner's, it's not a big problem the rest of the course. It's really.
It's not.
this
Yeah,
area
we were looking at
And
the
I'm
map, and that's
scanning
kind
it.
of what we
where
concluded
those
too.
backyards face the mountain.
These
Most of the
this
others-
particular area where
That's-
Shane's brought to our attention, that's kind of the,
Yeah, that's the main
Most of them, yeah, the underground looks native except for just this
Other than a
white-
few
this
places,
white hue that
where they've gone,
persists
that they've gone in,
golf
like with the
balls
swimming pool and some landscaping and just messed up.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, you
what
want,
come onto the
if
property.
we're identifying this, we want to be very careful, because this is not the only place we've had the problem. It had nothing to do with views in some cases, they just didn't like the look of the bush.
It's true.
Or they want the grandkids to be able to go.
So I think
That
this
was
is kind of a,
that was the
there
general
are some other
authority
places,
case.
but not an area as big as this along that backside of those homes, because they wanted to have that view, so that's why it's got to work out there.
It's interesting because as I play the course, that's not an area I look at a lot. Maybe it's because, like the mayor, I'm just straight and true down the middle of the fairway. But I've never really noticed that part of the course before. But I can imagine the homeowners there notice it, but I never have.
The reason you're not noticing it is because there is a little wash that goes down through there, and so there's some fairly high bushes on the golf course side, not on the out-of-bounds side. So from the property, you see this,
I see.
but from a golfer standpoint, unless you're looking for your golf ball, you wouldn't probably even get to where you'd see this area.
Really, most of the homeowners don't see it either, because they've got a wall there. They've got a wall there, and they don't see, they see the grass on the golf course, they don't really see that. I've been back there and looked at that, they don't really see it either. But then they've got steps that come down out of the yard, into the golf course, so they walk down in there and they kind of use that property, and so other people see it, but as far as from their property where the walls are, they really don't see that either.
Well, if I can, as a little history on this property, this is a foreclosed piece. It was bought at the court steps, and so they've been in and renovated it, and my clients are just wanting to put some final touches on it to improve the value. And, you know, sitting on the couch in there, that was the first thing they said, is that they'd like to just beautify that a little bit, because the view is just amazing out that window, and then you've
Yeah,
got
it
this
is.
little buffer area that's
I bet
kind
it is.
of ratty looking.
So do we start with having Jeff going out and maybe give us some ideas?
Is that okay?
Yeah,
But I think if we're gonna, get into, like, what, a few of you talked about, I think it becomes, who's gonna maintain that, who's gonna water that, who's gonna take care of it? I think we look at, if they wanna do that, they go up to the out-of-bound line and
Buy it
do the
and
same thing,
maintain it.
buy it, you know, put what they want in there. It won't affect the golf course because it's out of bounds.
Yeah.
But anything on the other side of the out of bounds would be the golf course. and we
If
would
not, I
look
think
at
we've
that.
gotta be the one to commit to it.
Yeah.
Because again, I can just see somebody saying, I'm not watering this anymore. And
Well,
that's their
that's-
prerogative.
You
And
end
so-
up with a foreclosure again, and that's
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so if you wanna do that, if you want us to, then that, I think that direction comes from you. And if that's the direction you want us to go, we'll do that.
Well, that's my thought, is either if we're gonna, if it's gonna stay as it is, we need to look and talk with Jeff about how we best natively restore that
Yeah.
in a native condition. And if we don't wanna go that route, then it becomes a sale. To me, that's the only two.
But
That's
see,
the
we-
best two.
But we've already got a neighbor that's improved here, you too.
Well, not as is, I mean, I don't think you're gonna go in there and tear it out today. I mean, it looks nice,
Well, that's the point. It may be so few lots. If it's the hole I'm thinking of where it goes down and back
Yeah.
up and you lose,
It's
you
just
lose
right
the
off-
balls every time.
it's just right
there.
off the little ridge, isn't it?
So maybe we're not talking about a lot of lots over there.
But
That's
you know what,
very important.
and that's a good point, but it's certainly gonna be very important to that particular homeowner.
Right.
well, that's what
Well, no,
I'm
that's what I'm
saying.
saying. So that's why it would be more limited than worrying about having a policy for every house
Right.
out there. Because
It
some
is-
don't even, this doesn't apply. Maybe it's a matter of just us bringing back some natural, just to make it look
So
better.
I was gonna say, if you get Jeff in there, you make it bring a
Yeah,
couple of
maybe.
bushes in. and
He may
get
be
some
able to.
wildflower seed and throw in there and
So you'll see here, right here, this one there is the one that is shown as being perfectly single.
Right.
These are kind of the,
But see, that whole area used to be lined with creosote.
yeah, well, in fact, some of
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and it was like that,
Oh, yeah, those are
it
beautiful.
was like that all the way along there. And they've taken
I
them
can tell that you love those, huh, that
out. Well, I mean,
course.
That's
Yeah,
what the course is. It's a desert course.
yeah,
And they've gone
I
in
hear
and
you.
taken out the native plants.
I hear you.
Well, part of the frustration with that is just the whole concept of going into another piece of property and removing plants. That's kind of the frustration we've had in times
Yeah.
past.
And you can still see in the areas where the creosote bush was, you know, where it's still mounded up, you can see what's
Yeah.
happened, it's just been torn out.
I think a lot of it's, doesn't get thought as deeply as we think it is. My family grew up on we backed up to the interstate and there's a lot of land between our property line and the interstate and we definitely thought we owned that. And so I don't think a lot of it, I'm not sure they were there with malintentions, they just thought it was something
Well,
that nobody cared
The
about.
last one that happened, the bushes taken out, that, they
When the
did know
cops were
that.
called.
The landscapers knew they shouldn't be on there. They were
Yeah.
told that if they got in trouble, that, to have them go talk to this lady.
But that's how they do it.
And so
no?
she knew, and they knew, because she
Yeah.
told them that they shouldn't be doing it. But she was paying them, they went in and did it anyway.
She's probably
So
not
they
there
all knew.
anymore, right?
It was done
Is she there
knowingly.
still?
I don't know.
So Mayor, where do you wanna do on your course?
I think we have Jeff go in and look at it, Barry, and see give us some ideas. You're okay with that, Shane?
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll discuss it again, but I think my feeling is probably we either own it or we let them own it.
yeah, I'd like to have Jeff come and bring us his ideas, and then,
Yeah.
like I said, it's either some native vegetation or sell it.
I can tell you what, in my opinion, what Jeff will probably say, and that's to put the creosote bushes back, the native bushes back,
So if
which
that's
I don't
the case,
believe the
let's-
homeowner's gonna like, because it's also gonna block the view down the road. They will grow up and they will
blocked out of view, but that's what should be done there. It should be back, restored the way it was native, the native landscape.
Are there other native plants that are smaller that they could put in there, and would it be a problem to put some chat down there just to kind of clean the dirt and kind of crust the top of it? I mean, is that something that we could work cooperatively with the owners on even? Other native, I mean, there's a lot.
That would be up to what your direction is.
Well,
If you want us to pay, if you want them to pay for it, or if you want to
Yeah,
take
I
care
don't
of it.
think the city wants to pay for it. I'd like to have Jeff involved in this discussion. This is,
Okay.
I
And
mean,
you
he's the
can
one that
relay.
plays on that thing every day, and
Yeah.
he can tell you what the future problems are gonna be with what decisions we start to make.
that's true.
I think as long as it doesn't, as long as it, fits the native course, as long as it doesn't affect play, I think we'd be good
There
with
could
it.
be some-
And the cost, and it's not a.
So
added
maybe if,
cost.
maybe if the owners were, let's say we decide not to sell the property, because that's a cumbersome process, we just discussed that on another piece, but let's say that there was a cooperation between the owners where they put up some of the money, put some chat down, maybe put some indigenous plants that aren't necessarily the big bushes, and then the city could live with that.
Well, I
But
think
maybe
it was
the,
done
maybe
right.
the owners do that at their
Done right,
expense,
it
because
wouldn't be much for us to maintain, to tell you the truth.
maybe any work that's done would be subject to the superintendent's approval there, and maybe that's a good,
If I'm not mistaken,
Compromise.
It's that same number 7 where the wall was encroached. And they had to actually,
Buy
city
the
council
property.
had them go in and they evaluate, they
Had to do an appraisal.
They had to do appraisal, they had to buy that piece of property, but instead of having them take the wall down, they were nice about it and had them purchase that piece of property, reimburse the city for it and do it right, but it's the same situation, it's just not a wall. So I'll talk to
I'd like to have Jeff come
Jeff.
visit with us, take a look at it, and then come give us.
Thanks, Barry. Thank you, Shane.
Hey, I appreciate you guys.
Sure,
Yeah, thanks.
absolutely. Okay, we'll move on. Discussion review of the utility accounts to be written off. Kimberly?
Mayor, council, thanks for the opportunity. We have 5 days left in this budget year, so as we're wrapping things up and starting to prepare for the audit, we just wanted to take some time to come and talk to you about our write-off policy and some accounting that we'd like to do as part of that. With our policy that we have now, it would be to provide a list to the council that we'd like to be sending out to you that will list the accounts that we'd like to be able to include in the write-off. When we talk write-off for this purpose, it's not accounts that we aren't going to pursue through collections anymore. What we're doing is moving it from a receivables over to an allowance for doubtful accounts. And
is it just like an uncollected debt? Is that what we call
so
it? Or
when you're talking with accounting, if you, a current asset, if you're not gonna expect to realize collection on it within a year, you wanna move it out of that general receivables account. And so what we establish is what's called an allowance for doubtful accounts, where you maintain the average amount of balance that you'd expect to be uncollected every year. And they both sit on the asset account. One's a contra asset, one's an asset, so that if you were to say, here's what our receivables are and here's what our allowance is, the net difference is the real amount of receivables that you'd really
Basically your
expect to be
current.
collecting. Correct. Yes.
What are your criteria? Are you looking at age? Are you
We're looking at
amount? Are you
aged,
looking
and so the way that the write-off policy that we have right now is established is we completely immediately would write off anything that was basically through a bankruptcy, once a bankruptcy judgment was issued. We have it now for if there's a death, if a death occurs, then they write it off at that time. And then if there hasn't been a payment received on the terminated account in over a year is the time frame that we have listed to be able to make these adjustments. So what we'd just be doing is moving it from the receivables over to the allowance for doubtful accounts. If there is an adjustment that needs to take place to bring the allowance back up is where you would start to see things hit a bad debt expense.
So do we send, clearly we don't send bankruptcies.
We don't send
To
those to
collections.
collections.
Do we send deceased ones to collections?
So in the past, we haven't. We actually just established a committee to start reviewing this over the last month. It was Carrie Wheelwright and I, Aaron from the utility office, and then Brian Brown in our finance. And I was going to have Carrie come up here in a second and talk about some of these policies that we've established on how we want to maybe address our collections going into the future. So I'll give him a few minutes.
What's the percentage of collections that would be assigned to that account?
The percentage of, I ran a number to look historically over the last 5 years. The amount of money that we don't collect compared to annual billings is 0.6%. Okay, so a little over 0.5% of what we bill out annually is what ends up being uncollected in a year. Essentially, ages out that way.
And we write how much of that off then?
So at that point, in terms of writing off of your accounts receivable, you write it all off, but it's still actively being collected on through the collection agency. And then if that money is collected, it is receipted in as a revenue. And our percentage for collections, once it goes to the collection agency returns around 21% of what we send up there.
Seems like every bankruptcy I've ever seen always has some utility accounts and phone accounts, and so they manage to tuck all those.
So we've
in,
looked at wanting to do things like, what can we do? Can we lien the property? Some other things where we might be able to get some collections at what is the timing that we want it to happen from utility billings to where we turn it over to the collection agency and make sure we're jumping on there as quickly as we can. And anyway, this is Kerry Wheelwright's expertise part, so I'll let him kind of explain the policy side. If you have any questions on the accounting side on how the receivables work with the allowances and stuff, I'd be happy to address those. We wanted to basically today to kind of just prepare you. It's a list that the council doesn't approve. It's what we do is we provide you with the list of what would meet the criteria, and then it's signed off by the mayor.
So you're going to give us names and amounts?
No, we won't give you names. We'll give you an account number and the amount that's associated with that account.
I imagine that most of the accounts don't become too large because at some point if you don't pay your utilities, your service is shut
Right.
off.
So the average, for what we have outstanding, the average amount is $500.
So it does accrue more than...
In those ones, so we have some that are extreme. We have some that are businesses that are large. We have some that are really small. I actually looked up some of them today that were under $10 that have been, sitting on there. They terminated, they left. There was a final billing that was minimal. They, did never pay it off. But the average amount that you see most frequently is around $500. And in those instances, generally there'll be accounts where they were shut off for non-pay. So you have that month that was basically at the non-pay, you've got 2 months of past billing. Once we terminate, there'll be a third month of billing. So you've got 3 months that are stacked up on those ones.
So then do they offset that with the deposit though?
Yes, if there's a deposit on hand, which would be $300, that would be offsetting. And
And
also,
it's still $500 even with the average, even with the $300
yes,
offset?
because I wanted to point out, we do add that collection fee that would be part of this final balance, so when we're looking at this overlist, approximately 30% of the value of it is going to be penalties and collection costs.
So your average is 500 after you've already taken out the
After we've added that on to their
fees,
balance.
after you've already
Backed out
and-
the deposit,
and
added
backed out
the
the
Right, so
deposit.
the deposit has been applied, there's been no collection, we turn it over to the collection agency, we add on those fees that would be associated. So,
We realize that collections is always a problem, so we've taken steps to try to tighten up what our collection policy is since collections falls under the treasurer's office. We've had several meetings over the last couple of months to discuss some of the things that we could do to better tighten up those collection policies so that we don't see a lot of accounts that go into the uncollectible status. One of the things that we have decided that we were going to do, in the past we have always relied upon the bills coming back. After people have had a final bill, we continue to send them a bill to what their address is, and when the forwarding address order runs out and we get that bill back, then that has been turned over to me for collection purposes. The problem with that is you're looking at 6 months to a year down the road before we ever get to those people. I don't know how many of you have ever been involved in collections, but I was with the Utah State Tax Commission for a number of years, and I will tell you that if an account gets more than 60 days old, your chances of collection are very small. So what we have done as far as instituting a new collection policy here is as soon as people close their account out, we will send them out a final billing within the next 24 hours. We'll get the meters read, we will get the billing out to them, and with that we will give them 15 days to pay that final billing. If at the end of 15 days they haven't paid the final billing, then that account comes over to me and I will send them a letter stating that we need to have this collected, and if it is not collected within another 30-day period of time, they will be turned over to the collection agency. So the accounts will be at the collection agency within 45 days, which gives them a lot fresher information to get to the people and to find information so that they can do some collection on it. Other steps that we have taken in tightening up our policy is we've also been negotiating with a couple of other collection agencies other than the one that we've been using over the past several years. And we've actually signed a contract with one of the local collection agencies that has given us a better rate as far as the collection amount goes, and will be a more aggressive collection agency than what we have had in the past in getting them some of the new accounts that we are having that are closing out. Questions?
It sounds like that obviously ought to help collect if you're gonna use that fresh information and send them out.
I'm sorry?
That's obviously sounds like that should help in the collection process. It ought to increase that from 20-something% on up to a much higher percentage.
Well, and we hope that we can get that, much higher than what we have there. And I think in many instances, what we're finding is a lot of people, once we do send them to the collection agency and they do happen to get a contact from the collection agency, several of those people have come back to us and told us that they weren't aware that they had a final bill. Whether that's true or not, I'm not going to say. But once that has taken place, why, we've had a number of people contact our office back and say we'd like to pay the bill, or we need to get something taken care of. And as we've seen the economy improve, we've actually found some of the older accounts that have come back to us and have been paid simply because people are now wanting to get into homes and so on and so forth. And we've had judgments that have been filed against them by the collection agency by sending them through their legal process. And so we've been able to pick up some of that money. That's one of the reasons why, even though we may be writing some of these off from our accounts receivable, we're going to continue to collect on them through that collection agency so that we can collect some of that money that has been out for quite some time.
So you just started that, Kerry?
What's that?
You've just started that one, that process?
We've just started with the policy that we were talking about, with the final bill going out and then coming to me within 15 days if they haven't paid that. So we haven't really had any exposure as to how it's going to work, but it's going to work a lot better than what we have had in the past, because we have found that if we can get a contact with them within that 15 or 30-day period of time, a lot of times people will realize that we do have something that we need to collect from them, and they will move forward with it.
And that contact then is just a utility bill being generated and mailed?
That is
US
correct.
Postal to their...
That is mailed out within 24 hours after they close their account down. And that billing will state on there that they have 15 days to pay that bill in full. And at the end of that 15 days, if it hasn't been paid, it comes to my desk, and that's when a letter is generated, sent out to them and said, you've got 30 more days to pay this bill, and if you don't pay it at that time, we have no choice but to send you over to our collection agency. And of course, we inform them there will be additional fees that will be on top of that.
Do we do any electronic billing, or is that something that our processes allow? Do we collect? I know with some of my bills, I can just get my bills sent to my email rather than mail. I know
You can
that's
do that. Councilman Hudson doesn't even get a utility bill. You can go in and elect and have it all emailed to you and have it all done.
What's the
You can
percentage we have now of those who are using electronic billing? Do you know?
You can even elect to just have
pretty
it be
sizable.
automatically paid every month out
Pretty
of your
sizable.
account.
We don't check our mail that often. It might be 15 days between times we check our mail, but I check my email every day. So I'm just wondering, and I know with a lot of my customers, we gather those email addresses too precisely so that we can recontact during those times to collect different.
When we have the
dollars.
application filled out, why we ask for that information as far as an email address,
Yeah.
whether or not it's still an active email address when they
Yeah.
close the account out, because we don't ask for it at the time that they close the account out.
It might be like T. Segmuller, class of Pineview High School, class of '95 at whatever.com.
There's a lot of T-Seg Miller, so.
But am I understanding this correctly, and Kimberly or Aaron, one of you, when an account is discontinued, it is a paper bill that goes out. So in that case, that's all, even if they were on electronic
I'm just
bill.
wondering if there could be an electronic notification too or something. I don't know. Maybe
Well,
that's just overkill. Maybe,
I-
obviously it's the responsibility of the consumer to pay the bill, but I know with us, I have an interest in my office of collecting the bills. So oftentimes we'll send electronic email or text message to, hey, your bill's due. And we have a lot of success collecting those payments. But it's not entirely, it's not the exact same thing, but I just was curious if,
And that's certainly a step that we can look at to see if it's going to be successful, because we're gonna try several different things to try and get the numbers down as far as
Yeah.
those uncollectible accounts, because we don't want the city to lose any dollars off the utility accounts, because that's what keeps the utility bills lower, and when somebody doesn't pay their
Instead of
bill,
picking up
that makes
by
your bill go
mass.
up, so.
Well, and I don't want you to take it wrong. I think it's great that you're wanting to get on these earlier and more aggressively. I like it.
It's hard, because it's, the comparison to the insurance world would be getting collections after the policy's already expired and they've benefited a few months, and that's, we're trying to collect people who already benefited from our service and now no longer need it. And it can be hard, I can say it's hard, but I like your proposals to get a couple of prompt notices out there.
Well, and it's interesting, I sit in that utility office often, and I hear people at the front counter, and it is interesting, the number of people that don't understand that they do have a final bill that will be coming, that they have used power, they've used water,
They don't even realize
up to a certain point, and their last billing, of
Before
course,
you've
was
already
in
used.
arrears, and so they may have another week's worth or 10 days worth or whatever of billing that comes to them. So in that instance, why some of those people may even ignore the bill, saying, I think I've already paid it, whatever else, and if we can make them a little more aware of that, why certainly we can save them the anguish of having to go to collections and us the anguish of trying to collect it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. Discussion review of Washington City 2012-2013 fiscal year budget for consideration of year-end amendments.
Well, mostly tonight, we just wanted to be able to try to address any questions that you wanted us to prepare you for. Tomorrow will be the public hearing where we open up and finalize the budget for the end of this year. So, I don't know if you had any chance to look at the detail that went out, shows what the original budget was. And when we say original budget, it's the last amendment. So if you recall, we did do a budget amendment this last year in September. So that column would have been the amendment to the year end. Were there any specific questions or any specific areas you wanted me to review with you that you had questions on?
I know as I skimmed through it, I noticed there are quite a few differences, some large, some small. Maybe it'd be helpful for me if you could just kind of highlight some of the more significant changes
You bet.
in the budget.
Okay, so with I did run a little spreadsheet here that would show me the difference, and then we'll kind of go through and pinpoint some of what those specifics are. I'm going to hit some of the smaller ones first. When we're dealing with the Special Service District for Coral Canyon, that's probably our most significant difference. It's $5.8 million. The reason is because we did the refunding of those bonds. Because it's a governmental fund, the bond proceeds actually report as revenue, and then the payoff of the old debts report as an expense. So that is why you see that large. I mean, that's the only reason, the only driving factor behind that one. But it is, very substantial.
On building permits, would we just, it looks like we doubled what
Building
we
permits and
budgeted.
I pulled that up today, and year to date, we've surpassed that by $2,000. So we
So
have
we
a
just-
few more days left, and
Yeah, let me tell you on numbers, just
In
so
reality,
we're,
just
I haven't done the
more
final
for-
numbers,
Yeah.
but you're right. Historically, for the past 2 or 3 years, we've done about 300 and some odd permits. This year, I believe we're gonna be close to 520. So yes, we did not budget, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's.
We were
good thing
conservative, that was
under
good.
budget on
Yeah,
that
we
one.
were very conservative on that one.
It's interesting though, because well, sorry, I read that incorrectly. Animal licenses, we got that about dialed in.
on the animal licenses,
It's actually quite interesting to see how well we're able to project on some things, and other things, there's a lot of variation. Even
there.
like Class C road funds.
Class C road funds, yes, and that really was a budgeting discrepancy there. There is some accruals, some year-end accruals that take place, and there were for the people who provide that budget, there was not the best. They didn't recognize that there is basically a whole Class C road funds come in not quarterly but every 2 months, and there's an accrual that takes place. So we will. The 1st of July, we have money that comes in July, August, that entire deposit gets moved back into the previous fiscal year. And so at the time that was being looked at, it appeared that there would be more than there really would be, so.
When is that money received then?
It comes in every 2 months from the state.
Okay, but then the August receipt
So
is
the
still
deposit that we
budgeted for the
received in
prior
August,
year?
right, because it's, the accrual for it is that it was owed to us
Oh,
prior to June 30th.
During the prior fiscal year,
Yes.
gotcha, okay.
So
we
it
just
gets
don't
pulled out. So
receive
you
it
still
until
receive
after.
everything that you would, right? It's just if you happen to take a look at it before that accrual is moved, we have several that are like that. Our usage fees for electric and water usage, we do all the money, all the usage that gets billed out in July is actually accrued back into June. We have several of those that take place. So
How are we not 100% precise on our rentals, like the Reagan sign and the
The-
radio site? I know that
what it'll come into will be 100% of this, and as I went back and I reviewed it to see, the budget amount hadn't originally taken into place the fact that there's a 3% on most of these rental leases that was increased. So when I went back and I looked, the initial budget and most of them were the same as had been the budget the previous year and so
our
forth. So
forecasts we missed
so when
did not
I did the
factor in.
year-end projection for these, I took into account what the final would have been and made it.
That miscellaneous revenue on page 3 that we projected 50,000 and had 142,000, what was that?
Yeah, miscellaneous revenue is one we kind of talk about every year. It is a really hard one to project. Historically, we probably have hit around the $100,000 mark, but the items that are coming into that would be if we have an auto accident. If we have an accident of which the insurance company is going to be sending in premiums for us, that money comes in as revenue. The expense that goes out to pay off the repair wasn't budgeted either. So you may see things like an equipment supply and maintenance in a particular account. All of a sudden, they're over budget by $10,000 because you don't plan for that type of stuff.
But most of this revenue is
So,
offset by a corresponding expense
most of
then?
that, right. What you see hitting miscellaneous revenue in most instances is offset by a corresponding
It's the
increase in
roundabout on
expense.
exit 13 that they keep.
So, right.
We could make it a budget line item maybe.
Put a rubber
We had
bumper
some
on the
repairs to the
sidewalk.
fire engine this year. I think that they were probably 35,000 or so.
And then we just pull from general fund,
So they're general fund departments, and so the revenue comes in from the insurance company and the expense goes out from the particular fund the vehicle belonged to, or whatever the purpose is.
I'm seeing Kimberly on our youth council that we had 0 revenue coming in. I know that there was some revenue, maybe it's,
I actually talked to Wendy just yesterday about that, and so she said that it had gotten receipted in through Easy Facility, lumped in with the Cotton Days, and that she was gonna provide us with the number. We'll do a journal entry to move their
Okay.
portion over.
all right. Glad you're on top of that one.
I'm glad I am too. Woo. Ask some more like that. There's plenty out there that I may have to look up. I try my best to pick the ones I think you might be most interested in, so.
So fund balance, we projected to use 343,000 and we're actually using 111.
Yes, I really do think it's gonna be less than that. When it comes down, my ultimate goal is we can get as close to 0, and I think it will be pretty close. So I think we might end up using about 1/3 of that. So,
Great.
yeah, so, that's, let's see. With our water department, that one is another big one that you see that was down. Basically, we did a reduction in their budget by $3.5 million. It's directly related to capital projects, that basically didn't occur for that. Let's see.
There was one that I saw that was a capital purchase. I'm trying to find it. It was like 58,000, 56,000. It was an unbudgeted.
If it was in the general fund, we did buy a grader in the streets department. I think it was the grader that we didn't anticipate, and it
That was just a couple
failed.
months ago.
Yeah,
We
I
had to
remember the
take care of
grader,
it.
Especially the tires of the graders, what I remember. Okay, so that's the grader then.
How are we so far off on insurance? I'm on page 8. 14 or 15 lines down.
Just switch over so I'm looking at the same report that you are.
So where you see the page?
Page numbers in the very bottom right-hand corner.
Bottom right? Okay. Oh, there it is.
The insurance items that hit this particular account here, which is non-department, are basically our property insurance. So, this is one, that basically the general fund picks up the entire expense. So we're talking liability for auto insurance, property liability. Anytime we pick up a new park, we have to add insurance on those type of features.
Plus, I
It
will
all
mention
gets
with
budgeted
respect
out
to
of
that,
here.
they go through and reappraise
Yes.
our
We just
facilities,
had-
which they just did.
And,
That affects the rate.
I think they came the first of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I think this year's then they
Yeah, we
reappraised.
just barely finished a Hughes appraisal where they had a company come in and go to every single one of our facilities and do the current appraisal on them. So that did adjust quite a bit of our values of our property, and that's what they got, so.
You tell them that everybody else in the world's going down, why is ours going up?
We're getting more parks and trails,
Oh,
and so all of that gets added in. Every time we add something new, our thing goes up.
Insurance goes up.
Jeff, insurance doesn't go down.
Well, I had a guy in my office just yesterday, said, give me a crack at it, I guarantee you I can save you some money.
So again, this is one where basically the general fund expenses it all, and part of the transfers that come in from the enterprise offset these costs that are associated to them specifically. Was there anything other specific on the general fund you wanted me to touch base on for
I was just
you?
gonna note under other projects in the general fund, that's a little higher, but the majority of that was the city's commitment to taking down the walls at the Washington,
yes.
the Telegraph Towers, which of course was not budgeted for. That was 20,000 something.
What, on our, public safety, we've got the, what was it, it was right there, it was your part-time, why was it substantially, $30,000?
The part-time, specifically for if you're looking at 4210,
Yeah, 4210,
Okay.
correct.
so 4210, maybe you're not looking at 4210, because the original budget to the year-end proposed budget is the same, so,
Yeah, no, it's 40, let's see, 10, what I'm looking at is 4220, 4120.
so 4220, part of what that is being, 4220, okay, yes. This is gonna be for our fire department.
Okay, so this
We
was
did
that
pick
fi-
up
the
we've
firefighter.
got our firefighters that are
Okay.
already hired for the SAFER grant that are roll out into
Okay.
that.
I wondered if that wasn't firefighters, but I wasn't positive.
Yes,
that the way that
4220
account
is
number
fire,
would go.
yeah.
I'm on page 14, Kimberly. I notice
Okay.
our contribution to the community center is actually increased.
It is increased. I don't. When I'm dealing with my year-end budgets, I have to make sure everything balances. We spent extensive time with the community center reviewing their revenues, reviewing their expenses. We'll go to there specifically, and you'll see that they did actually cut their expenses significantly over the original budget, which is, let's see, we cut it down $163,000.
Was part of that moving employees that were paid out of the community center down to other departments? I know, for
Not moving
example,
them.
April Ellerman.
April's
No.
still out of the
No,
community
it's
center.
still being
So she's
funded.
paid there
yeah.
still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because even though she's located in this building, she's still doing flyers, doing work that's related for the community center. She's just changed office locations. But no, the main cost for cutting this back would be initial budgets for programs that they were planning on, but we decided to cut back on. So they originally talked about expanding the preschool and offering more classes, which would require more labor, and associated with that in the end, they decided not to do. When we, mid-year, we started to look at their revenues and things like that. If there was concern that the revenues weren't going to hit, we had many conversations about we have to start to drill back the expenses. We really want to maintain that percentage that the general fund contribution is. And again, because of just year-end and our budgeting, I need to have a balanced budget in order for that to make sure that we had enough in the budget for what the worst-case scenario we felt could be. I needed to increase that transfer, but I do believe at year end we'll be where we originally anticipated we would.
We really
in
had
terms of
some
the transfer.
some pretty strong May numbers, which again, we were running behind from a revenue standpoint, and Kimberly's exactly right. So we just said, you know, this is what's going to happen. We're going to make these mid-course corrections. Councilman Hudson was heavily involved in that as part of the committee as well. But end of April, 1st of May come in really strong for us. And so I think Kimberly's right. I think we're going to see revenue-wise.
We definitely won't hit what our original revenue projections were. We felt that early on, that they were a little more aggressive than we were going to be able to maintain. But they are up over last year. We will finish stronger than we did last year. I think I sent you some information recently about that, that overall our revenues will be greater than they were last year and our expenses will be less than they were last year.
So right now, we're looking at about 120,000 shortfall. You're thinking it might be more like half of that? I'm looking at the figures, 846 budgeted revenue, but 726 is in the new budget. Page 17.
I don't know if maybe my page is a little bit different than yours, but are you talking specifically overall revenues versus expenses? The difference in terms of what the general fund request transfer would be versus what we're.
I'm just looking at the projected revenue was 846,330. Under the new budget, the projected revenue is 726,184.
I think that's just one particular department area. So the total revenue for the community center would be 2.5 million, of which 900,000 would be general fund transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the original budget, the final budget, we were looking at 2.3 in revenue and $1,076,000 in general fund.
I guess I'm looking at mainly the membership.
So maybe just that first
fees,
division, that first main
division's
department.
Way down, and I guess we're hearing that we're having a good turnout in April and May. Is that figure gonna decrease dramatically?
I think that's your membership and your walk-in, your vendor booths.
Vendors.
Most of what you see is what we would look at as basic revenue generated by the center itself, not the transfer.
And could you say that again? So you said 2.5 million
So
revenue was.
what I was referring was, it's on, when you get down to like about page 32 on your guys' sheet, gives the grand totals for the community center.
Yeah,
And
this
it'll
is
show the
page-
original to,
Yeah, pages 16 and 17. Most of it's on the bottom of 16. The revenue totals on 17 is.
and that's only gonna be for one particular,
Yeah,
basically division within the
Yeah, what it
community center.
is your memberships, annual, entrance fees, rental fees, sales. It's most of the revenue that's generated through the front desk and whatnot there.
So as
that
of like,
I would see.
I ran a budget status report. It's not gonna include everything. I ran it as of today. But as of today, the revenue versus expense shortfall for the community center is 784,000. And the original budgeted transfer in was gonna be 900. So within the next few days, as long as we don't have a substantial amount, which we probably do have 30 days worth of expenses that will still continue to roll in and so forth, but I think that we will either be at the number that, I really don't think we'll end up coming in transferring more to the community center than was originally budgeted.
Yeah, so I guess we're transferring less than we had anticipated, even though on some of the revenue streams they're lower than
Correct.
what we budgeted.
Right, because we did a corresponding reduction in expenses.
Exactly, that's
So
what they
a
did,
lot
is
of it-
they made expense corrections along
That's
the
the
way to
big, that's
offset
really
that.
the
And that's
bigger
the way we
part of
follow
it is
all
the
of our
expense
departments.
reduction,
So if
not
your
a real
revenue-
increase in revenue.
Yeah.
And I think that some of these events that we kind of pulled out, or I think we are, who's the word that used dialed in? Did you use dialed in on the, animal licenses, yes, we've dialed in on the animal licenses. I think some of our programs, we've really started to say, you know, we can stream some of those. Those are not productive for us. Let's stream those out. And I think this has been a good year for us as far as being able to start to go through that a little bit and saying, we don't need to be we're not gonna make, this is not what we're able to accomplish over here, so let's don't continue to pursue that.
You talking about the ducky drop?
Well, the ducky drop is actually,
one of our, one of our better ones.
Just teasing.
You're gonna keep that.
Some of the others are not so much,
The
though.
crocodile dropped into over.
Crocodile drop didn't go over so well.
This is the thing that I find so interesting in governmental accounting is, and I noticed in some of our others, that some of our biggest difference were bank charges, but in this particular account, we hit it dead on.
Well,
It's like,
the other
okay.
ones, it's because the community center doesn't have any debt. So bank charges, for the most part, it's not having to do with, like, fees associated with return checks or things like that. You might see that only in the treasurer's budget. But in our other funds, they're specifically related to the trustee fees. So with every bond that we have money
So
that's
you
being
can get
held by our
indebted.
trust agent, and they have annual fees that are associated. So some of them, when we did refunding, you have the original cost, and then you have the refunded amount that has a new, annual trustee fee that gets associated with that came into play, so.
Well, I always read those as being as credit card
Right,
transaction
and some of
fees
them
and
are,
those
yes.
things, and so-
So
Yeah,
like
this
if you
would make
were
sense
looking
that
in the
you-
utility
that you
office,
debt-exed it.
the court, and the community center, and the golf course, those are the ones you're gonna see merchant fees that are associated with credit card processing, yeah. So.
Well, there was one that, let me back up because I highlighted, it was way up in the front that almost looked like we had missed a zero. Where is it? 'Cause
I thought you were
highlighted-
gonna say it looked like one was just misbudgeted.
Well,
I was
no,
gonna
it
say,
was-
Hopefully it's a
Alfred, thank you.
revenue, we wanna add a zero to the end and make it bigger.
Correct, yeah.
Nice stuff.
It's on
Lots of zeros in
page,
front of it.
Yeah, no kidding.
it's on page, 2.
Okay.
And it's in, it says court cost fees and charges, we budgeted 26,000.
No.
And we show a reality of 2,600.
Yeah, this is one, this will be the last budget year that you're gonna see that, but I think I talked about this during our last update. We have a surcharge that's for fuel. Before we converted to Chorus, we were able to break that out into its own revenue source, where we could see the funds coming in with some of our court fees, that we tie. Now that we're on Chorus, the state won't break that out for us, and so those monies are now lumped in with our just general fines and bails monies. Okay, so we originally budgeted assuming that we would be able to account for it in its own separate category, and we can't. We don't have a way to break it out. So the fees that you are seeing in there are gonna be, if there are other people who came in and were trying to file small claims and things like that, fees that the court charged in association with those and not actual surcharges.
And you'll see in the fines category, that actually was increased.
Yes,
the budget
so-
account.
And I see, this is like, that's the exact same number. We're
I
just
know.
missing a zero there, so.
Yeah,
I'm on
just
page-
happens that it worked
page
out that way.
22, we missed the registration fees for preschool by 70,000.
That was where they decided not, they had originally anticipated having
Several
several
more
other
classes.
afternoon classes, and they
correct.
decided not to.
Yeah, and, there's just not the cost
Well, and
associated with
And I
that.
see below that part-time salaries reflect a similar
Reduction.
variation, yeah.
If you want me to touch, a little bit on the golf course.
Touch on the golf course, because I like what you tell there.
Okay, so, for the golf course then, let me think what year. 2011, we were basically $496,000 was our shortfall at the end of the year. 2012, we had cut that down to 398, and for this year, our anticipated is 225, I think. I gotta get to a different report for that, so.
I know it seems like in the past we've lost some employees there too. Hopefully that's not just cutting expenses.
Yeah.
Are we seeing some revenue increase at the golf course
We're
too? I
not.
know.
No, revenue is flat. has been for the last 3 years. We anticipate that
I don't
to
know if we can cut
continue
much more expense out of there and
We don't feel
keep
like
the
we
golf
can.
course. I mean, I know you got guys up there that work hard, and so this has just been cost-cutting measures.
Well, now, I want to describe what flat means here. On the year, it's flat, because our first quarter coming out, but we're seeing the last couple of quarters where revenue has been much stronger than the previous year. So we think a combination of a couple of things are... Yeah, well, we think a couple things are going on there. Certainly the cut of expenses, we did some labor cuts that had an impact, and we're really seeing for this year the full impact of those. Second of all, this year we lost our debt service, that final little piece of debt service, if you'll remember, and I believe our last payment last year was about $60,000.
That was on the golf carts? Is that right?
No,
No.
that was on that capital lease that we did for the clubhouse expansion.
Cart path.
Was that before me, maybe?
Yeah, and then the golf cart path extensions, all those were extended.
Golf carts are ongoing.
Yeah, those kind of are there.
We're gonna have those come back, if that's what it was.
So those were the two expense cuts, but again, they don't account for all of it, and so the good news is, I think some of the marketing and promotions that we've been doing have had an impact. I absolutely believe that. I believe that there is more play, there's more, and you council members had a big part in that discussion, if you'll remember. And then second of all, we are seeing a little bit of trending upward with the golf play, not just with our course, but other courses. So I think those things coming together, we have seen the last 2 quarters again. Kimberly's right. You look at it on the year still, we're kind of flat. But if we could keep these last 2 quarters trending that direction, we'll really like what we see.
What did we anticipate our loss to be on the, or our transfer on the golf course to be? Do you remember?
Yeah. And you're correct to an extent on your statement with the golf course. We do not do a transfer on that. They did originally anticipate it to be 156. That was specifically because their revenues were overinflated.
So we thought we were gonna transfer 156,000, we ended up doing 225.
Yes, and just to clarify, there will not be a transfer. The general fund does not, we don't
So
transfer to our enterprise.
Okay, so, okay, how do we
Because
cover it?
it's an operating business, so their cash flow.
How do we cover the shortfall?
Their
Help me
cash, they are being cash flowed basically from,
General fund covers
yeah.
that.
But in terms of
We cash flow up from the general
transfer,
fund, we don't transfer it?
no.
For whatever.
Because it's I mean, like you could, if you guys wanted to budget and authorize it and say,
Alright.
but typically,
It's okay.
Because the golf course is a proprietary fund,
You
functions
just keep
as a
us out of
business.
trouble.
What you would like to see is over the next few years, like we have done so far, that gap gets narrowed. So yes, in terms of the original budget, it's gonna come in higher. I knew it was from the day that budget was adopted. But what you're actually seeing is, again, 2011, almost 500,000, and then 2012,
Yeah. So
300.
even though that was aggressive, the
2013,
perspective is
225,
pretty good.
yes.
Okay.
And then again, I believe what we budgeted for next year is back down to this around 150,000, and I do believe we'll hit that or less. And that is with us holding our revenues basically flat. So if the trend does continue and they come in, then what we wanted to do is really give you an accurate budget of what we felt you would see throughout the year. So,
Construction workers might be dusting off their clubs again,
I think we are seeing a little bit of that.
coming back out there.
There's always the possibility of selling
So-
landscape easements along the golf
That might make up that 70.
yeah.
We can add that
$70,000.
to my fishing derby revenues.
So in the future, when the golf course makes money,
Leave on the table every year.
when the golf course makes money is when you'd start to see, basically that goes back into reimbursed cash flows. If the, if that was something the council wanted to do, it's something that you would tell us, we'd factor it into the budget but otherwise, no. So a good year. 2013 has been a good year, so.
Yeah, the amendment all looks better than it did look,
Yeah.
so that's encouraging.
Okay, so, again, feel free to ask any questions you want to tomorrow night too. If you have any newer questions that you want me to be prepared to address in tomorrow's meeting, just send me an email, and that way I can make sure I've got your answers for you, so.
Okay.
But at tomorrow's meeting, we won't go over any of this. You'll basically have the public hearing if there's any questions, and then the adoption, so.
One of the things I'm gonna send to all of you is, I think you'd find of interest, will be for lack of a better word, I'll call it a cash flow sheet on the golf course that we have internally that I'll share with you on revenue, expenses, and comparisons. I think you'll find it pretty interesting on what we're seeing with that. Our Finance Department prepares that for us each month.
Okay, Kimberly, thank you very much. Item 7, discussion review of expanding the Washington City Cemetery. Barry Blake.
Would note that
I think y'all have these
our cemetery revenues.
as part of that. You want me to put it up on the,
Would you mind? Yeah.
Yeah.
With the growth, we also died faster.
okay, as you know, we are looking for cemetery property, cemetery grounds. This has been discussed before. This is the soccer field east of the Ball Diamonds. We actually had talked about this years ago, and then I believe Councilman Staley brought this up not too long ago, and we revisited and looked at some of the measurements, and just to explain it.
I can't orient myself that way.
Okay, this is
No, but I just mean,
Just tilt your head.
Drive right here, right? Cemetery over here about a half block down. It's just right down this driveway. Kind of keep going. Cemetery north is this one right now is. This little section, in fact, this line right here is our main line for our valves. Both ways.
That already
The
exists.
main line already exists. What we're proposing is to do just in sections, in phases. This would be phase 1. From this point to the south, we would actually come off this slope. This is some drip line area. It doesn't get really steep down this way. It's really steep off this little area right here. So
this is kind of your idea, Councilman. so
Yeah,
you wanna
I wouldn't mind even a wall along the sidewalk that you
that's
could,
what we're talking about. We're talking about actually going in and doing a
Because that-
retention wall or some type of a wall that looks nice. Do some landscape this area, really make it look nice and actually buy it some more.
and also you can vary above the wall, right? You
Yeah,
can,
for sure.
yeah.
How close to the street can you get? I mean, how far down can you go?
Well, you see where we're at the other cemetery, we're right.
Can you come almost right to the street?
Well, you'd have to have about the problem, at least 10 feet.
So pretty close.
Yeah, that's what we can turn down. Not so much on Park and Drive, yeah, we probably have.
So you're thinking a wall and then maybe a landscape strip between the wall, the street and the wall,
Yeah,
but
right
then,
down here, we would probably bring some material in, so we didn't have as much as slope, we probably would still slope it up a bit. We'd still do materials around the slope.
Yeah.
Places.
yeah.
But even if, and so, and this wouldn't even, this would be for over 5 years. Very conservative estimate, and that's, cutting this down quite a bit, it would be 500, 600 plots for this one area right here.
So it's from that purple line to the street?
Here, now, and that's only really coming from here. Is what I've estimated plots.
And you may
If we went down more, we could pick up some more.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got a
So,
50 feet there.
You just don't want your slope too great.
exactly, and that's why we have to do some retention, which would be an expense, that would be one of our, large expenses. And that's accounting for walkways and everything there.
I think you make,
We're looking at 500 to 600 plus plots, which would be just a lot. Until we need to come in the next phase and have, soccer fields and place where we need to do this anymore. But until then, the soccer goal right now that we have is approximately right here. It's on the side. We probably have to do a temporary fence or something.
fence across the board.
Yeah, just as a privacy type thing, whether it's vinyl or whatever, we probably have to do something solid.
Don't want to kick over a headstone.
We moved up to the next, when we do the next phase. And,
No, you probably wouldn't.
But this area here is 20 years plus plots. For all phases when we're done.
Yeah, this really is a good piece. Just point out the retention basin there too. This is a retention basin, so when we do flood, we go into the field, but this is what's so nice about starting at the south. We rarely go to the south, but what our plans would be is if eventually this would be fully encompass a cemetery, we would just expand that retention basin, and basically build it bigger along the road. So what you'd see is that width right there would kind of just spread up toward the, I don't know, what is that, northeast?
But we're not picking up any more water than we did
Well, I think we're what, 5-year? 10. We have overflowed numerous times on that retention basin into the field, and we don't want to do that when there's headstones there. Now, again, this is a discussion we can have 10 years from now, but that's at least the
We
plans.
just kind of teardrop it, so it's stretched out and skinny.
Yeah, that's not got the, that's not a,
But it's,
yeah, we have. Yeah. We've been full and discharged.
it's gone over the edge of this, I think.
Doesn't go over the edge. It's not,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
there's water
Yeah,
coming into that.
it spills
Yeah,
out.
it comes in and then it lets it out. But we have been to the capacity of that thing before. It's not as big as we had originally thought, the storm event was, but that's why we talked with Public Works and we would just expand it before. Again, this is years down the road, but just so you know, we just expand the width of that
There'll probably be some
basin. Yeah, just kind of bring, exactly.
kitty-looking configuration.
Yep, exactly.
Nice. But then again, that's what this area is also for flood control also, because it's grass area. I don't think it'd be too different from the cemetery, not that we're gonna get so much that would wash anything away, especially for this change we have there. So that's what we're looking at.
Are you thinking that row of pine trees is gonna come out?
Yeah, they would have to, those would have to come out, which I don't see a problem. They're kind of hard to transplant, I don't think they're too good of a.
My only thought was maybe you could leave every fourth one or something, you know?
Yeah, you could probably, we'd have to see what design. That's
Just-
kind of what we come to you for, is saying that, does this look okay for us to
On the design.
pursue, to go to design and go that route?
It's just hard to take out old growth trees like that. You can't really replace them. It would be nice in a cemetery to have some of those there.
You know what, we can certainly try. I know we've transplanted some trees before that have done well, but those pines typically don't do very well on a transplant.
Well, yeah, I don't
Not
know,
like
especially that size.
Not like an ash or.
I just think if you're, I understand we'd have to take some of them out, but we could probably.
Yeah, and that's what we'd certainly look at salvaging as much as we can and making that,
The
putting
good
that
news
into the
about this
landscaping.
particular design concept is, Barry, are you comfortable with the funds that we have available?
Oh, yeah.
See, we have funds available, and that was a big concern of us, if you remember, of a raw piece
Purchase
of
the
ground.
property or, yeah.
And so, I think we can be back with the columbarium.
Yes, that would be included. We would do a columbarium with
That was one
this.
of the items that we held
But it-
just because of the cost issue.
Place it in the detention basin.
Yeah, no.
Kidding you, look
Good place for ashes.
It's not good on the ashes.
And I think there's some neat things we could do with it because it fits within a very good
kidding. Don't-
conservative budget for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, in fact, I think we'd have money left over with
Yeah.
what we have, for other phases down the road, down the road for
And we
for
could
the
maybe
years
even
to
put in a
go.
little bit more mature trees, some of those
Well,
things.
we would certainly, when we did that area, we're gonna lose some trees, but we would also incorporate planting some trees with that, so we
What do you got,
would be
maybe
a,
12 or 15 trees there?
would be a plus or an
At
even
the end of the
to
day,
what
you
we
could
lost.
keep 4 to 6 of them would be nice,
Yeah.
right?
It'd be nice if you could get a whole row along that, between the buffer between those houses, especially if we expect that to be
Well,
cemetery.
tell you the truth, I'd love to try to take some of those out and do it and see what we get, and see if we can make them work, and if we do, good, if we don't, then we can go and replace them, but I think we try to do it. Well, yeah, we've done that before. There's a company that has a great big spade, comes on a truck, and we actually go and dig a big root, a hole for the roots. If you get a good root bait, that's a root base. So we would have those holes over there ready to go, and then we'd go spade those, get as much root as we could, and just,
And we'd
Transplant
maximize
'em
the
over.
space then with the design and
Oh,
put
yeah.
that wall down as far and get as many
Yeah.
plots as
The
we
great, the
possibly.
great thing, Councilman, is you're great about helping us save trees. That cottonwood tree down by the dog park, remember, was we call it the Segmiller tree down there.
That's why I asked you to save it.
Yep,
No.
and just so you know, not everyone agrees with it. We did get a recent complaint that there's cotton blowing into the park.
Yeah.
So we told them we couldn't really do much. Oh, and it was really hot too, wasn't it? That was another
you
complaint.
couldn't control the
It was
temperature
hot
or
and
the
also
cotton.
Cotton blowing into the park.
Tell you what,
It was uncomfortable because it was so hot.
you won't have any dogs complaining about that cotton.
But certainly, we will look at all those things and we will do a great job doing that. We'll design that, make it look nice, and
I
uh,
like the concept, Barry. I worry that it's in an active place, but so is our other. When you look at all the people that come and go, why other ones for the baseball fields, and that's just the reality. And I like that it's close to the other ones.
And we'll try to deal with that the best we can. Like I say, we can still utilize that. We can phase it in. By the time we go to the next phase, we'll be, you know, we won't need those soccer fields. And so,
Well, and I frankly think it's a good use of the dual parking.
I do too. Yeah, I think it'll
Well,
work great.
and Barry's right. The time that this gives us, the soccer fields will be in place. It'll take care of this anyway. Quite frankly, if we can get the years out of this thing, more than likely we'll have some other, or some additional ball field facilities. I mean, those are still
Exactly.
even on our long-term plans as well.
Yeah, but we're not giving them up
Oh, no.
right away either.
No, and we're not. We don't have
But
to deal
that's
with that.
but this is that's a 20-year.
Can we
Absolutely.
That's a
tie them
20-year
in? I mean, will it flow okay
Oh yeah.
to one to the other? That was the only thing that I.
Well, it's right close. I mean, you
think
have a
it's
lot of
close
that in
enough.
different areas where you go from. We have it right now. We cross the street. We did an addition.
Yeah.
That's not a whole lot different than what we're doing here. It's right. You know, you come
We get a
right.
baseball field.
I like it better than tearing out a baseball field.
You come right down here.
Well, like,
It flows, doesn't
I think the baseball field location is preferred just because of proximity, but I agree with Chris.
Well, you know what? Down 20 years down the road, when we have other facilities, they might take going to the ball diamonds after that's all done and have that whole thing down there. But certainly this will buy us until all that time's done.
It's interesting,
To
in some
plan for it.
industries, that was kind of the lookout hill when pioneers would climb and bury their dead so they could look out through the valley. And
Yeah.
Look
You-
out.
If you remember,
if you go to the old part of the cemetery,
It's on the knoll where you
and just look right off.
Oh, I
the-
thought you
the-
were, I was just gonna tell you that I was just last week on Lookout Mountain in Tennessee, and I wondered if that's what you were referring to.
No, this is
Beautiful
just-
view of
Lookout Washington.
Washington City.
those who grew up here, all of you did. This was a big wash. This property was probably 15 feet below these homes. This was all filled.
Piney Hill?
Where did that fill come from?
It's a big improvement.
Did it come from the building of the community center?
No, that fill came from Telegraph when it was way down and clear out.
Clear out the SR9.
Way back here, is that, they took all that, and they were doing that and driving.
They're doing that.
Some
This
good.
road wasn't in, we worked with the
Right.
property owner.
Was our cemetery,
Adams.
was our cemetery recreation and public purpose land as well? Was it? Where the cemetery is now? Was it also RP&P?
It's been the cities for forever.
Because of course, all of that the school sits on and the community center was all RP&P. The old stuff was not.
That
It
field
probably
used to
wouldn't.
be-
Long for RP&P.
That probably did, you're right.
That was a Lookout Hill.
It was
He said, we will bury our dead here.
Was the cemetery, was the old
stories,
pool?
you bury your dead up in the hill.
That looks good.
That's kind of the direction we'll go. We'll start planning, but we have plenty of money to do it and do the columbarium and
Well, and we'll bring back, once we get the planning prices, we'll bring the planning prices
that?
Where do you
back.
think you'll put the columbarium?
we'll do it in the same place we had before, I think.
Oh, back over by the.
Yeah. We'll look at all that. But that's all planned out. I think we could do it
Maybe we should have a
ourselves. And
walkway
I think we could even probably do this ourselves, to tell you the truth.
We allow
Maybe say that.
families to plant anything around their headstones.
No, they're not.
So anything that's planted comes on our plans and plantings.
And-
Yeah.
And just so you know, while you're on that, we've had a number of concerns expressed by our community, and I appreciate the Parks Department, because over the last couple of months, they've worked awful hard to kind of
Diffuse those.
clean up. And, you know, it has made a difference, because the complaints we've actually have gotten have been more that it's become way, you know,
People decorate too much.
and quite frankly, it is a challenge for us. The Parks, we're gonna do some additional signage in that up there to try to encourage people to try to, the ordinance actually, we already have in place the ordinance that allows the parks to kind of maintain it themselves
Remove it after 7
and
days.
remove it. We've been a
We
little
try to be
liberal on it,
sensitive.
but quite frankly, what that's created in some cases is that's created a problem for us.
Yeah.
And
Get
so,
a really powerful lawnmower with a good vacuum on it. and just-
Well, the problem we get is they start sticking stuff in the grass and, clear out and decorating the whole area, which,
It's
if
hard
they
'cause
kept it on the headstone, it'd be a lot better, but and then it's a maintenance problem and it's unsightly and
there's
then
some
when we throw
decorations-
stuff away, they get mad.
Yeah, but
So
there's
we're
some-
kind of in between it, but we just want to make it look nice. So
There's
that's-
some that are very appropriate as well. I remember old
Yeah.
Atkins decorations and the way his family decorates his. And
Yeah.
you walk past that grave and you remember the man.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
it's hard because it's a real fine line.
It is,
Yeah,
and
we
so we
got-
have to be sensitive to that.
we've got some that they'll pile up the beer cans and skull cans and
Yeah. So it's
There
a,
you go.
but
Remember the man.
Remember the man.
Remember the man.
thank
Still
you.
smell him.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks.
Okay. No other discussion about anything else? We can make a motion for adjournment.
I'll motion that we adjourn, Mayor.
I'll second that one.
Motion and a second.
Truman, aye.
Staley, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow, gentlemen. Thank you all for coming.